Hi everybody, this is Emily Blakowski, co-chair of the Tell Us About Your Travels program, and for this month I will be talking about my travels to Ireland and Northern Ireland that I did back in 2014. So if we had our program physically, this would have been our food and drink menu. Most of these can be found in the World Foods aisle at Meijer. The coffee can be found in the coffee aisle at Meijer. I also want to point out that the McVitie's digestive biscuits were really popular in Ireland, that I would see adorable commercials all the time, like the one selected here. So I wanted to discuss some reasons why I went to Ireland and give you guys a basic geography lesson. So first things first. So when I was a student at Aquinas College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I found out that they had a study abroad program, and one of the countries you could go to was Ireland, which happened to be their oldest study abroad program, which they've been doing since 1972. I wanted to learn more about its history and culture, and I also had some heritage in that country as I'm a little bit Irish. And one day I was talking to my theater professor, and he happened to mention that there was an opportunity to do a theater internship over there. So when I was a junior, I decided to apply and got accepted into doing the program in the winter semester of 2014. Now on to the geography lesson. Here we have the provinces of Ireland: Ulster in the north, Leinster in the east, Munster in the south, and Connacht in the west. For the most part, we stayed in the Connacht province, and every now and then I will refer to these provinces during the presentation. So here are the counties of Ireland and Northern Ireland. We had to memorize all of the names of the 32 counties. And I also want to point out that not all the counties in the Ulster province are a part of Northern Ireland. County Donegal, County Monaghan, and County Cavan are not part of Northern Ireland. So what we will do for this presentation is that these will be sliced up into 4 different videos. The first video will talk about the excursions in January, the second in February, the third will focus on March, and the fourth will focus on the travels in April and May. So this is the first video, so we will get started talking about the travels that we did in January of 2014. So we left the Grand Rapids airport, we flew over to Newark where we encountered this frequent flyer, and then from there we landed at the Shannon airport in Shannon, Ireland in County Clare. From there, we drove 3 hours to our home turf in Tully Cross. Tully Cross is a village that's on the really west coast of County Galway, which I'll show you in the map in the next slide. It is so small that if you were to drive through it, you would not have realized that you drove through a village. This village only has a church, 2 pubs, a hotel, and a theater. So that's for reference in the map there. This was the cottage that me and 4 other girls from our group stayed at during our time in Ireland. So Aquinas College owned 7 of these cottages. 4 of them were intended for the students, and we had about 15-20 students on this trip. 1 was for the professors, who were a married couple with a 3-year-old daughter, and another one was intended to be our classroom. Now, the thing to note about these cottages is that they were intended for the summer, so they were not well insulated. That's why we needed peat. We also had temperature control, but the program had a budget, so we were encouraged to use peat to heat up the cottage as much as it was allotted. So this is a portion of our backyard, and as you can tell, it was a pretty beautiful day in January. I also want to point out that we were studying abroad during the polar vortex. So even though we got very little snow, we got a lot of rain, sleet, and hail, which actually was recorded to be one of the wettest winters in Ireland. And here is another portion of our backyard, and as mentioned before, it is still really pretty and gorgeous. And another portion of the surroundings. Cows! Alright, so this is Tully Beach. This was about a 10-15 minute walk from Tully Cross. And as you can see, it has some jagged rocks on there, so we had to be careful, but it was a nice day to be going out to the beach on a January day. And here are the sea walls, as they're really pretty. I know it's a little hard to see because the light, but believe me, when you get up to those walls, it's really gorgeous to look at. And there's me! And there's a portion of the paved road that would lead into Tully Beach. And there's a nice scenery there to go with the day. And then a few days later, we walked to Letterfrack, which is the closest town to Tully Cross. It was about a 40-minute walk or a 10-minute drive. And you can see that the buildings there are pretty colorful. And they have a lot of signs. I want to tell you, we encountered signs on the highways and byways and street corners like these. They really want you to know where you're going. And another thing to point out, much like the sign for Tully Cross, is that most signs are going to have them in English and in Gaelic, or what it's known as Irish, because there is also a Scottish Gaelic. Sheep, because, you can't be in Ireland without taking pictures of sheep. Here we are at the Tooreena Cemetery, and I also want to note that we visit a lot of cemeteries in Ireland. And I also want to point out that there is a Celtic cross on the left side, and it's not always used in the religious context. And here is a better close-up of that Celtic cross. Another portion of the cemetery. So this is Renvyle Castle, the home of Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen in the 16th century. As you can see, this is the remnants of that castle, and I wanted to point out that all of these excursions at this point were really close to Tully Cross. And here is a potato ridge, or a lazy bed, and these were how potatoes were planted. And then when there was a certain type of bacteria that affected the potatoes, that led into the potato famine in the 1840s. And here's a cool looking stump. It's pretty cool. That's all I have to say about it. And not too far away from the stump and from the potato ridge, we encountered a Neolithic tomb. This is another recurring thing during our travels. We encountered a lot of Neolithic tombs, especially the passage graves. So now we start our first major excursion. As we made our way to Derry in County Londonderry, we stopped by in Foxford in County Mayo, not Mayo, Mayo, where we went to a museum which had these really creepy mannequins. And on the left side, there are two of the girls in my group. They're just being goofy. You can't quite see it, but there's actually a hologram right on that face, which made it look real and like it was talking to you. It was really creepy. And right next door to the museum, we went to the Foxford Woolen Mills Cafe, where we had some food and took a tour of the factory portion of it, where we saw how their products were made, including this mechanical loom, and it was really interesting to learn how those products were made. And here is one of my cottage mates, Gabby, who is trying on that sweater that she actually bought from that cafe. Then we made our way to the Drumcliffe Cemetery at the St. Columba Church in Drumcliffe, Ireland in County Sligo. Now I have a question for y'all. Who is buried at the Drumcliffe Cemetery? You want to know? Well, I'll show you. It is Irish poet W.B. Yeats, and the cemetery really wants you to know that W.B. Yeats is buried here. Surprisingly, this wasn't his original burial place. He died in France, so as a result, he was buried there. But about 10 years after his death, his body was moved to County Sligo according to his wishes. And right over by the cemetery, we encountered more Neolithic tombs, including ones that were placed so short that a tall girl like Megan here had to duck. So now we finally arrived in Derry, in the county of Londonderry. I know it's kind of on that border there. Oh, wait. So I just want to discuss a few things. So, if you were a nationalist or Republican, who were mostly Catholic, as in you wanted a united Ireland, you would have called the city Derry. However, if you were a Unionist or loyalist to the United Kingdom, who just happened to be mostly Protestant, you would have called it Londonderry, hence the sign that's pointed out by the white arrow. And this is the Catholic side of Derry. And here's the Protestant side of Derry, and to be honest, there's not much difference between them. So I could go through 400 years of Catholic and Protestant tensions in Ireland, but there was a simple explanation as to why those conflicts occurred in the first place. As you can see, Northern Ireland is much closer to the United Kingdom than the rest of Ireland. When English and Scottish planters, who many of them were Protestants, came over in the early 1600s, they arrived in Northern Ireland, aka the Ulster province, to colonize the land, and as a result, they pushed the natives, usually Catholics, off them. This was the reason why Northern Ireland has such a strong Protestant presence. The rest of Ireland is much closer to France, a historically Catholic country, than the northern part is. In fact, the Catholic Church in Ireland considers Palladius, a bishop who came from Gaul, which was mostly made up of France and consisted of Celtic tribes, as the first Catholic bishop when he came to Ireland in 431 AD. And another thing to point out is that what we think of as Catholics and Protestants is much different in Ireland. So, enough about that. Let's get on to the pictures. So we went into Guildhall, which was the place where the mayors and the council of Derry would often meet. So we took a tour of Guildhall, which we saw a lot of things, including the Hall of Mayors, which is shown in the upper left-hand photo. There were a lot more mayors than that. The rest of the pictures depict artifacts found in a time capsule found in 2012. These were buried during a ceremony marking the layer of the foundation stones in August of 1877. And I also want to point out that the newspaper says Londonderry. Now, at this time, Ireland was a British colony, so of course, Derry would be known as Londonderry at that time. Here we are in the main hall, where on the upper left-hand corner you would see the pipe organ and some of the stained glass. I would also advise to go on the Wikipedia page for the stained glass at Guildhall, as those are really pretty and really gorgeous. In the left photo, I'm actually standing right at the entrance of the Bishop Street Gate, which leads in and out of the walled portion of the city. The right photo shows a better picture of that gate, and the fortress itself was actually built between 1613 and 1619. So, you couldn't go through Northern Ireland without mentioning or referring to the Troubles. Here are some reminders of those tensions. The first two pictures reference the Bloody Sunday Massacre in January 1972, as a good chunk of the victims were shot in those areas. Now, I hate to depress you all, let's have something more uplifting. Here is the Peace Bridge in Derry across the River Foyle. It was built to improve relations between the Protestants, who usually lived on the water side, the east bank of the river, and the Catholics, who normally resided on the city side, aka the west bank of the river. After Derry, we made our way to Belfast, but we made some stops along the way. Two of them were to visit the monuments to Cahir O'Doherty, the last Gaelic chief of the name of the O'Doherty clan, who lived between the 16th and 17th centuries, and former U.S. Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill, who helped to craft a peace accord in Northern Ireland between 1977 and 1987. O'Neill became an honorary citizen of the Republic of Ireland in 1986. We also stopped by St. Aengus Church, which is considered to be one of the most beautiful churches in Ireland. And I have to agree, its beauty is mainly in its simplicity, and I have to acknowledge the hole in the ceiling, which is very angelic. Then we visited Dunluce Castle in County Antrim. Dunluce Castle was a medieval castle built in the 13th century, and it was the seat of the Clan MacDonald. And I have to tell you, it was very steep and tall. We had to be very careful as we explored it, or else we would get hurt if we were to jump off one thing or another. Luckily, no one was hurt as we explored it. Then we explored Giant's Causeway, which is also in County Antrim. Giant's Causeway is a land formation made up of basalt columns created 60 million years ago through a volcanic eruption. However, the locals like to believe that a man named Finn McCool created them, and this is the myth. You can also watch the video retelling the myth, which just happens to be the same one that the Giant's Causeway Visitor Center would constantly play. So stay tuned for part 2, where I talk about Belfast, Clongmanoise, the Newgrange Museum, and Dublin. See you next time. Bye!